Welcome to the screencast for your second assessment. I hope this information will be helpful in your completion of the assignment, which is due on Friday. So first things first, what I'm going to do is, just as a reminder, take you to the research paper of our website here. And obviously you've already clicked on this icon to get you to the screencast. Next thing I'm going to do is just use the sample 2 assessment. I will share this with everybody so you can take a look at it more specifically on your own. But right now, what we'll do is just going to kind of walk through a couple of minor things that I need you to take a look at. Okay, first and foremost, for this assignment, recognizing for those of you who are advanced and proficient in your first baseline assessment, you're going to need to make sure that your topic sentence for your second assessment is broad enough that you give yourself the ability to talk about both of the articles in this paragraph. For example, in the first assessment, many people just referenced right away the first article title along with Chris Mackey. So you talked about how going bananas for eco-safety, written by Chris Mackey, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, since I know I'm going to be using Green Bananas by Rachel Jackson, I wanted to avoid including both titles. So this is one way to approach it. And again, the topic hasn't changed. You can see here that I'm still going to be writing about the environment and the working conditions related to the banana production. So essentially that's the same. I've just tweaked the topic sentence a bit from the previous writing sample. All right, next, I think that it's very important for you to recognize that as you are providing your data from the different articles, that you make sure that you have taken the time to include your voice. I know we talked about this in class, to make sure that you've analyzed the data that you're selecting. All right, so as I just kind of move down here, I see that I have an example regarding the improved warehouses, isolating chemicals, solid waste traps, avoiding contaminations, etc. And what I attempted to do is make reference to them to provide analysis here and talk about how these measures that are taken ensure safety for the environment, and they also provide a safer ecosystem for the Costa Rican people as well. So again, it doesn't need to be extremely lengthy in your analysis, but I can see that you have taken the time to make an attempt to explain why it is important that you've selected the information that you have. Put it in your own words and make it clear for your reader. I think as you move down further, you can see the same thing. In this case, I've taken a look at Rachel Jackson's article, Green Bananas, and I've mentioned the 31 tons of plastic bag and twine that are recycled annually. And of course, this was part of the data as well, where the floorboards for the bridge were created. If you look at the very next sentence, considering that in years past these bags and twine would have been discarded, this effort is quite impressive. So again, trying to make a statement here that's going to indicate the significance of the recycling movement with that amount of waste. Again, as we talked in class, you could project out and say, if you wanted to, that over time, the amount of tons of waste that would be just discarded would be even more significant, so it's good to make sure that's being recycled. But again, the attempt has to be made for you to address this issue when you're given some data to provide your own feedback. So as we talked about in class, that's a pretty significant item to be aware of. All right, next thing that I want you to pay attention to, and that is, now that we're dealing with a paragraph with multiple articles, in this case 2, we have to be aware of how we're going to cite those articles. For example, you'll notice that I have a couple of items identified in red, Mackey here and Mackey here. And then you can see in blue, I've indicated Jackson and Jackson. Now, as you know, those are the 2 authors who would have written these articles. So you can identify your source within your paragraph by using the author's last name in parentheses. So in this case, I've actually borrowed directly, not from a speaker in the article. It wasn't anybody that was interviewed, but rather I just liked how Mackey wrote those words, promote the products as environmentally friendly. So I took them word for word, and I had to give recognition by placing Mackey in parentheses here to document that correctly. If you'll notice further down, this information as well is taken from them. It's from the article. It's been paraphrased or basically summarized. I put it in my own words, And what I'm doing here is identifying once again that even though I didn't directly quote it, I still have to recognize that that wasn't information I knew on my own. I read it and I found it in Chris Mackey's article and gone ahead and identified it correctly. Okay, so two ways that you can document a source. Here is one, using the author's name in parentheses. And again, if you think back to your freshman year when you gave your speech at the end of the year, that is something that you practiced as well, putting what we call parenthetical documentation in a source because you're documenting in parentheses. Now, if you scroll down a little bit further, you can recognize here that when I transition to this article here in this example about the 31 tons, I've chosen to use a second way to document the source. And many of you have done this already in your first baseline assessment, where you can use the title of the article and the author's name sort of as part of the sentence that you're transitioning to. So it says, moreover, the article Green Bananas by Rachel Jackson notes that Chiquita has begun recycling, et cetera, et cetera. So notice how you've done successfully completed the task by identifying author name and article title. And you'll notice down here, it wasn't enough for me here just to go ahead and identify the title of the article. One of the last examples I'm using here says, similar to the article Green Bananas indicates, and I still went ahead and put down Jackson in parentheses because, again, she is the author of the article, so therefore I'm going to place her name in parentheses here. Now, why didn't I put her name in parentheses up here? Didn't need to because I've already identified her as part of the text for my sentence. Here it was necessary down below because, again, I've identified the title but not who the author was. Okay, and the same thing's holding true here when you look at my next sentence. You identify Jackson in parentheses, but I wanted you to know that she is the author, in which I can find, in her article, I can find Raul Passo's statement. The idea is to always be improving. That's the important part here, to recognize that direct quotation must be identified by the author's last name. Okay, not the speaker, but who wrote the article. And again, we know that was Rachel Jackson writing that article. So, two items we've covered, definitely making sure that we have our own voice and as part of our analysis of the data. And then how do we go about citing the information that we're taking, considering now we are using multiple sources in this article. And again, the last point of interest I just want to point out to you here is to make sure that when you are paraphrasing, when you are summarizing an article, you are putting those ideas in your own words. For example, if you look at here, recycling 3,100 tons, even though the author may have been saying them a certain way, I want to make sure if I'm not directly quoting that author, I'm going to go ahead and put those examples and those words in my own words and still give, obviously, acknowledgement to who wrote the article and which source I'm using. All right, because again, the last thing we want to do in this is have a situation where we're plagiarizing a specific source and not giving credit. Even though we like how it sounds, we still have to make sure if we're not directly quoting, we have to put it into our own words and still use something like Jackson or use something like the author's name and the article title. So I hope this information finds you doing well with your writing. If you have any questions at all, obviously you can email me and I can give you some feedback, or stop by when I have an open lab to help as well. With that, that's it, and good luck.